Welcome to the Cottagers Podcast, a production by Cottage Pastures.
On this podcast, we discuss rural living, homesteading, and small-scale farming.
You'll hear conversations and interviews about the realities of modern life and returning to the land.
I'm Matthew.
And I'm Carissa.
We're the founders of Cottage Pastures and your hosts on the Cottagers Podcast. Greg Cello, welcome to the podcast. I'm extremely excited you're here, man. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's snowing again here, so we're gonna get some fresh snow. Get rid of all that old looking snow, which I always appreciate.
That's funny. So I was talking about this online the other day. Snow is like the first time it comes down, it's so beautiful. Like you look across the landscape, everything's buried. It's like a big blanket. And then I go out and ruin it because I step in it, and then it just progressively seems to get worse and worse and worse until it melts away.
Yeah, it's very ragged looking in short order.
Right. So let's, man, I'm really excited to talk with you here. I came across, we're engaged with one another online. You've been an incredible, I think, a very inspirational voice in a world right now that is very focused on not inspirational things, right? I see you talk about the faith. I see you talk about these very strong key words that are incredibly inspiring to those of us who are interested in homesteading and agriculture and farming and, where the Catholic faith comes into all this. Maybe if you don't mind, just kind of give a brief introduction, who you are, what the family looks like, where you guys live, just, who are you guys right now?
Sure. So, as you know, my name is Greg Cello, and I'm married to my beautiful wife, Christina, and we got 4 children. We have a 5.5-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and an 8-month-old. And this all really started when my wife and I met one night, and we told each other we were both Catholics, and we both wanted 4 kids. And that just set off a whole night. I think we talked almost till 4 or 5 in the morning till I saw the sunrise. And she had invited me to her family Christmas party later that day. So I said, sure, well, we should probably get some rest. And within 12 hours, I was meeting her dad's side of the family. And then that was it. We were engaged 9 months later, married another 9 months later. And I was in the military. So she moved down with me down in Savannah, Georgia. And I finished off my military service down there. I'd always planned to get out. I wanted to start a family somewhere where we didn't have to move. So I believed very strongly in developing roots in a community, in land, and the military just doesn't work with that. And so that was a big mindset. So we actually didn't start having kids right away because I was constantly gone. I was training, I was deploying, and I just can't have kids in this. I can't do that to you just yet. And so I ended up actually being on my way out medically retired through some just injuries I had during my service. And then we moved up here to New England. And I mean, to break free of the whole, schooling, military, mental thinking system that I was in, I was very rigid. And I was doing what everyone else did. I considered going to business school. I was like, I need to go to graduate school. I need to get a job in corporate America. And that's when we started having kids. And this was 2019. And then COVID hit and everything just started changing in how I started viewing things. I read this book called Omnivore's Dilemma, and I started learning more about our food, which I'm sure a lot of people have read that book without knowing anything. They're like, what is going on out there? What are we eating? What is this actually all about? And I read this during COVID. I'm in graduate school at the time, getting my master's in medical sciences because I was considering to go to medical school. And the kids were in daycare. We were living in Boston, spending an exorbitant amount of money doing that. We weren't even with them. I just had this realization that this is not what I want to do in my life. And so I finished that degree, and we decided to just pull the kids all out. I didn't go to medical school, and I said, let's go buy some land in northwestern Rhode Island, because Rhode Island is where my wife's family from, and let's plant roots there. My family's kind of scattered to the winds. My parents are divorced, and my dad was in the military, which is why I had such a desire not to do what he did and raise my family in the military. So I said, well, you have family here in Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts. Let's plant our flag here. And so that will land us here to this property we're on now, which is about 7 acres, and slowly but surely trying to figure out how to homestead can be a charged word in itself. People get pretty angry when you're not totally self-sufficient on a homestead, so you can't call it a homestead. But I just call it a homestead because that's just, that's the mental framework I have for the kind of life I'm living here. And I think that's what brings us here to this land and this home, that little journey, which was many moves to get here. We're the roots we planted, we finally feel like we found a place, and we're really starting to flourish. And that's kind of right around when I came onto X, because I was stewing for a couple of years here on this land, thinking about what I need to do, what are we doing? And so I kind of came on with like, I know what I'm doing now. So
very neat.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's something that a lot of people are. I think it's important to consider that more. That where do I want to establish roots, or where am I going to plant roots, or because it involves so many other conversations. Like, how do you build not just a place to live, but a place of protection, a place of flourishing, a place for children to be safe and to take care of family needs. What is it? What did that look like, I guess, in the beginning for you all? What does it look like now? Or where are you going with it, I guess? Like, what's the priorities currently?
So the priorities are just, like you said, I think you need to be rooted in a place with people that and for a long period of time. And because that's when the kids can flourish. They get comfortable with their surroundings. They get comfortable with their people they go to, especially when you incorporate going to a church, a parish every Sunday, and you develop that community. And so when we got here, that was kind of the goal, was like, what do we want this to be? And we weren't even sure we're going to stay here at first, because, we had just been moving so much, it just felt like we were going to move again. But once we realized like, this is it, that's when we're like, well, we need to get ourselves rooted to the land here, because there's a lot of things we didn't want the kids in school, so we need to homeschool them. But to homeschool them, you need to have things for them to do. And I believed having them doing things involved with the family. But to do that, you got to have stuff going on around the home. I truly believe that, because you can only be inside so much. And so that's when I was like, well, we got to build a homestead, because that's projects, that's hands-on work, that's getting outside, getting away from, untethered from this kind of machine we find ourselves, all of us tethered to, TV, just electronics or phones. And so that's when I got chickens. We started building a garden. We got a flower garden. We got raspberry, blueberry, blackberry brambles. And I think that's kind of the idea. And we try to incorporate our kids into that, because we want to, kind of develop a generational legacy here now.
One of the things that people, they'll come and visit us, and they almost always ask about the children, and they'll say, like, maybe we're out butchering chickens or planting something or getting eggs, and they're always curious about how the children handle it. And I'm always able to say something along the lines of, it actually seems to be a lot easier for them than it is for us. Because for us, we're unlearning, all of these patterns, all of these norms, all of these mores that, we've been, that have been built into us, from city life, suburb, wherever we were, basically just not around food production, not around land, not around plants, not around animals. To them, it seems so much more natural. Not even in a, I can teach you this, it just connects well for them. And I think that's really neat.
Yeah, I think it's really neat. I think, I've written about this before in terms of, the way they eat food too. And I think we were quickly chatting about this online, and they seem to understand the more natural way to eat. It just makes sense to them. So when I put food in front of them, they tend to gravitate towards, as long as I'm not putting candy and chips in front of them, but they tend to gravitate towards fatty food. I swear, my daughter, we'll get a nice little rack of lamb, and she will just devour the fat on it. And if my mother's here, she sees that and she loses her mind. She's like, she can't be doing that. I'm like, well, she seems to actually know what she's supposed to eat, because good animal fat's incredible for you, especially for a young child. And so that's what she's attracted to. And same with outside. When we're outside, they just are so comfortable being dirty in the garden, helping out. But for us, like, to come from the military, living in the middle of the city to the suburbs of here, I have almost 20 years ingrained in me in all these systems. And like you said, these norms and mores that have just been incredibly hard to just untangle, especially when I didn't grow up doing any of the stuff I do now. My dad didn't do any of this, neither did my mom. And so, like, to not only untangle all that, and then to build these more natural skills rooted in the land and with my family has been a challenge, but it has been the most beautiful thing because with the kids, they're a part of it. And we're just doing these things and they're along and they love it. They bounce between my wife and I, and they seem so happy.
I love the optimism about it, and I'm really excited to talk with you here because it's inspiring to me. We're a few years into it. Sometimes you hit some of those bumps in the road, the challenges, and it can be a little bit difficult to push through. And then you meet someone like yourself who's just so full of excitement, and you do a great job of reminding me, and I hope many other people, about why we're doing this, because it's very good. So now you write a lot, as I understand. Talk us through some of your writing. What are you focused on writing about, and what are you hoping to, like, what are you hoping your words bring to the world right now?
So I've been writing a lot. So I don't share all my writing. It's actually, it was one of the ways that I broke through a lot of these kind of systems that had been entrenched in me for a long time. I would just write in my journal. I think I have 10 journals just full of writing. I use Moleskine journals, and they're just like filled to the brim with notes and ideas and thoughts. And it started as I made this transition into this life. And so I was like, well, I think a lot of these could be useful for other people out there who are trying to figure this all out too, because I think there's a lot of others out there who are kind of confused and lost in this modern society they find themselves in, especially when so much is filled with, a real, a nihilistic view of the world. And it's really unfortunate. And they just don't know they're in it. So I started sharing it. And it really started with, my Substack went through a couple names until I finally hit the name that made the most sense, which is Kinward, which is the combination of kin and then forward, or toward, really. And it's, the whole idea is that we're moving towards kin, towards family, towards community, towards roots, towards Christ, and towards eternity. Because I believe that we should be working always towards those things, so our kids and our great grandkids and our communities can all continue to flourish and then ultimately reach God in eternity with us. And if I'm not aimed towards that, then I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think it's important to write about that so other people realize what should their focus be. Because if eternity doesn't exist, then everything I do right now just doesn't matter. But if it does exist, then absolutely every decision and choice and thought I make has a profound impact forever. And so that's what I should be working towards. And should be working towards a kind of generational thought process of creating that. So I write about those ideas to share with others, for other dads, really, because I think they have a big impact on, how their family operates and making decisions like that, but also for moms and just parents and maybe men who are not sure really what to do and are kind of lost out there. And so I hope it finds them as well and makes them realize that maybe what they were told is not really what they should be going after. Maybe there's something a little more profound and important in their life they should be seeking. And then there's another aspect about discipline dissidence, which is it's about critically thinking through norms and mores of society. And so I think people see that word dissident and they see it as a little more doomerist. And it's actually more the opposite. It's more optimistic, but I'm examining what these doomerists look at and they think are, something that we should be afraid of and reacting against negatively. Try to look at them for what they are. And maybe I accept them, maybe I not. And so maybe I'll toss a norm out of my home and be like, we're not doing that because I don't think it's actually for the betterment of my children and my family and our future. And some I'll accept. So for us, I don't believe in public schooling. I think it's very coercive. And it's just not rooted in it right now in what we believe is Catholicism in the land. And so I said, I think it completely takes them away from it. So I said, we're not doing that. And so we're going to bring them home and we're going to figure it out. And it's not easy. It's very difficult, obviously. I had to, we had to take a lot of cuts because me not working, I do have a pension, but is it very difficult to live on. My wife has a job that helps as well, but it's unfortunate because she still works and so she's upstairs. And so during the day, I help out with the homestead, growing it, the children, homeschooling them while she homeschools them when she's free. And so these are all the things I write about and sharing so other people can be a little inspired and encouraged that they can go forth on this type of life.
Very neat. Yeah. Well, I think these are topics that I think can be incredibly inspiring, especially to young families, young men, women, eat real well. Not even just that audience. It's really, because what we're starting to find is that across the span of ages and experiences, people that we would never think are familiar with the ideas of living on the land or the importance of it, continue to come out and say, "Oh my goodness, I remember, growing up on my grandparents' house, and we had, they had all these like memories of chickens, and, I saw someone recently said to them, I haven't seen a family farm, a proper family farm in so long. I forgot what it looks like to see pigs, actually on the land." Or, one of the things I think is really interesting is how infrequently people seem to plant flowers. Not just go buy flowers from the store, but like actually like plant flowers. And how it was actually, I was thinking of this because I was looking at one of your stack posts, and there's a picture of some tulips, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I've 10 tulip beds, raised beds.
yes. So I was thinking about this, how much like natural color and beauty is able to easily be brought into the land and into the home. But we don't, it's so infrequently that you see that if you were to plant in a suburb a window box with a couple flowers in it, it would stand out. Like it would be a conversation point because
Mm-hmm.
it's so infrequent. And those are little things that we can bring into life and start to connect people to to the land. There's something about it that people inherently seem to understand that it's good.
Well, I think because there's goodness in beauty, right?
Right. Sure.
Right. So I think when you see something beautiful, you seem to innately realize that, well, there's something really good about that. And so like it's funny, the window boxes, when we lived in Boston, we had a little apartment townhouse. We were living on the first floor, and we had these two window boxes in front of it, and they were just dead when we moved in. There was nothing in them. They were kind of decrepit, and I was like, we got to bring these back to life. This is crazy that there's nothing, no one's doing anything in these. So that was like the first thing I did when we moved in, and I went to a kind of a garden center that was down the road. I just walked on there, and I just started picking out little flowers and little things I could plant in there. And then for the 2 years we lived there, I was like an obsession of mine. I would change it with the seasons. I would, even during the winter, I'd plant, winter holly, like all sorts of little things that could continue to live there and show the colors even during the, the winter, especially the late winter when you don't even have Christmas colors up. And so when things are really at the bleakest for most people in the New England area. And yeah, that's what I think I wrote a recent post about this. And it's like, when there's such a nihilistic and doomerous mindset around, people are like, well, that it is what it is. What are you going to do about it? And I'm like, well, you can do plenty. And it starts right here with your home. It starts with what you allow in your home, what you allow to be, immersed with your children, those kinds and then outside your home, just go plant some roses, go plot a little garden, and, get some sunlight in your face, and you'll just see such beauty, and you'll realize there's so much goodness just by being out there in the land. And the second you do that, it's almost like the doomerist and despair of what's going on in the world just immediately disappears, and you realize, I think we'll be all right. Maybe we need to get outside a little more, right?
Right. Let's talk about that just for a minute here, because I think that's something. It's an attitude and a perspective that we all need to adopt, and I mean that really sincerely. The narrative often, I think, online, and we know this: algorithms, echo chambers. What gets clicks, what drives conversation. Focusing on the things that are ugly is almost scandalous, and it's just too easy. It's just too easy. I think it is. I just think it's too easy. I think we need to really be honest with ourselves. Are we focused on building a utopia on Earth, or are we focused on heaven? Because if we're so focused on the problems on Earth, then I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Like, what does it matter? Like, I get the impression sometimes people forget that the goal is not to get stuck on Earth. It's not to live here forever. It's to go to heaven.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think that is literally an unfortunate mindset, I think. And I'll be honest, I mean, talking about conspiracy theories can be fun. I mean, I have a close group of buddies that sometimes we just start having a hoot and a holler talking about some of these conspiracy theories. But it's like when you're done talking about them like that and laughing and realizing, it's like you need to just realize, like, okay, now we need to move on from that. And, when we break away from having fun talking about them, reroute yourself to what's going on in real life. And it has nothing to do with those. It has those things. It's always going to be there. This always have been there. All these problems of humanity here on earth will always exist. And there's just so many things that can trick people too. For me, I went through this phase of optimizing my health, and it was a little ridiculous. And every day was focused on how can I the reason why I thought it was good was because, well, because I was improving my health. Improving my health was a good act because it improved, I don't know, maybe my ability to live longer, which is a pretty modern trope of why you optimize your health, because you want to live as long as possible. And by doing that, that means I'm around longer for my children and all that. But what ended up happening was I was incorporating my family into this almost self-servicing type of life for myself. It was very selfish, actually. And my wife was so gracious. She went along with it, and she was beautiful. But once I realized what I was doing, I realized how silly it was, because it wasn't focused on the right thing. I was focused on here on earth, and it did nothing for afterwards. And I realized that's what it was. It was not selfless at all. What I should be more focusing on was those around me, obviously, not myself, which is what it became. And I think that's a good example of a lot of optimizing things out there, not just your health. And it's focused on right here on earth. And so we need to focus more on eternity. And so I have this saying that I use sometimes in my writing called eternalist generationalism. And that's just striving for eternity every day, not in like every act, but like almost like just the way you move about and make decisions. They should be read for upwards and forwards. So forwards for your generational line, like what are we doing here to improve their life, and then upwards to getting us to God. So
Now, I wonder what you think about this. One of the lessons that I have taken away, and why I feel so optimistic as well, is because when you're out on land, you're growing food, whatever quantity it is, you are, working with animals. The cycle of life happens before you every season, right? So every season, seeds get started again, either, naturally because they fell off, a plant, or because you're planting them. They grow for a certain amount of time, and then they die, right? The plant's expired. And then you do that again. You go through winter, you go through a rest period, you have a productive period, you have a growing period, you have a harvest period, and then it keeps happening. No matter how much you produce in one season, likely you will be doing it again the next season. It's the most humbling thing when you think about it.
it is.
You can't even, you could overproduce, enormously. Eventually, that crop is probably going to rot and not be usable anymore. So you will eventually have to grow again. You see this with animals, same way, And so I feel that there are lessons from the land that apply to the spiritual life that kind of make a lot of temporal problems. Not that they're not real, just that there's nothing to be surprised about anymore, right? Like there's nothing to be surprised about how not good people can be, or how not good, life can be. It's just not a surprise. What's kind of a bigger surprise is God loves us so much that he looks at us and says, I want you with me. And so here's a pathway to do that. So, and I think there's a strong connection in these natural lessons from the land. What has been, like for your family moving onto the land, were there any particular challenges in adopting like this type of lifestyle, or anything that stood out to you in the very beginning that was particularly maybe in contrast to, the way you guys were living previously?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the seasons. I think the moment you connect yourself to the land, and I felt this the most the moment we got chickens more than anything. Because with the garden, I was doing the garden, I have the compost, and the compost goes, well, it's not dormant right now, obviously, but it looks it. When you look at it, it's covered in snow and I can't get to it. But underneath it, it is working. It is getting ready for the new season, and it's actually a kind of beautiful thing. And you can't see it, but you believe it. You know what's happening, which I think has a beautiful connection to God itself and Jesus Christ. To be completely honest, it's like the idea of seeing is not believing. It's just believing that it's happening, because you literally see it happen as you use it come springtime. But with the chickens, I realized that when winter came, in the past, we just go inside. you're just inside during the winter. You kind of escape it. You're just not connected to it anymore. It's not, you don't realize the reality of what's going on outside. That like it's tough out there. And then once you connect yourself to the land with chickens like I did, I had to be outside every day. I'm building a chicken run because in the winter, animals want to eat my chickens. So now I have to get outside and protect my chickens if I want to keep having eggs every day. And it was such a profound realization that that's what happened. And then I realized, well, the moment you're connected to land, and you especially land you feel the four seasons, we're not living in Southern Florida here. We have to deal with this. And I think it's good for humans to deal with it because it reminds you that we are human. Like we have to prepare every year. And you have to be ready for the winter. We obviously still have a lot of modern comforts living in the home, but the moment you do something outside, it makes you realize that that's actually not normal. What's normal is this vulnerability we have. And like you said, like I think it's a beautiful thing God has created for us to deal with. The four seasons, going through winter, fall, winter, spring, growing, reaping your harvests, and then hoping those, harvests, especially if you're fully self-sufficient, gets you through the winter, and then just do it all over again. And you do it all over and over and over. And it's humbling because, like you said, it doesn't end until your time here is done. Like it just
Right.
keeps happening. It's like, it doesn't matter how successful you were one year, you have to start over again. It's a crazy feeling. And it's so exciting when you are like, last year, my tomatoes did horrible. The year before they did amazing. And I was very humbled last year. I was like, I don't understand what I did wrong. Like, and now we had very little canned tomato sauce, unlike the year before, which was so amazing to have. And how humbling that could have been if that was actually a huge, here we can go buy more. But like, if you can't, back in the day, that was pretty awful. That could have a dramatic impact on your family. And I think I recognized it more than ever now.
Yeah. It's interesting, even, what people will choose to grow now. And I always give people the advice, don't just go open the seed catalog and pick all the cool looking stuff that you've never heard of and never tasted just because it sounds cool. I'm sure we've all made that mistake in some capacity. I did too. The first year we grew all kinds of stuff. Didn't eat almost any of it. Like the better thing to do is just go into your kitchen and see what you eat. So like, what's in tomato sauce? Maybe, tomatoes, maybe onions, maybe some garlic, maybe some herbs. Just start with that. Do that, and you'll probably be better off. But we had a similar experience. One of our best gardens actually wasn't even on the farm. It was in the suburbs. We built this crazy cool garden, dug up a whole backyard in the west side of Cincinnati. We were growing corn in the middle of the city, and had so much good production. And we've never actually recaptured that solid a production. It's one of my goals this year is to try to make an effort to do so. But
yeah, my garden is still very much lacking. I mean, I never gardened before until we moved here, and it is a beast in of itself because there is just so much to it. It's actually pretty wild and incredibly humbling because like you can't just spend a little time on it. You actually have to tend to your garden every single day, and we like to do the no dig method because I've learned so much about the importance of the soil, the fungi in it, the mycorrhizal, and just respecting the roots and everything that's grown in it. So we put tons of compost on it every year. I don't ever actually dig it up except for when I need to put in my seeds or my transplants. And it did better last year in some areas and didn't do great in others. And it's just still so much to learn.
I agree. Now, one thing I noticed recently is that you guys may be looking into sheep or, something around like, getting some kind of animal for wool. What are the plans with that? What are you thinking, Eric?
So definitely looking to get sheep. We have some land here that I think could handle maybe 5. I've done the calculations, to try to make sure they don't tear up the land. I can keep kind of moving around. I mean, that's all in theory. I have no idea what will happen once I get them. Outside of that, there's so much pasture land that's just unused in this area. Like I don't see animals anywhere, but I see all this land. And I'm not talking a lot of land. Here in Rhode Island, it's a small state, but it just can't help but think that if I just go talk to some of these people and get to know them, I mean, that's my community. See if there's, handshake deals I can do over a couple of beers and be like, hey, I'm growing a herd of sheep. Is there any way I could, rotationally graze them here, it'll be good for your land. It could be, there's good. My little kids will probably be running around. Maybe bring some life to this area, and we'll actually improve your land and use it good and treat it with respect, which I think is great because it helps conserve all this land rather than allow it to be bought up personally. But yeah, the whole idea with the sheep is, I think there's something beautiful about wool and a wool sweater because it connects two ends of things that I really believe in. And one is subsidiarity, which is, you know, focusing on the family unit and the power of the family unit and doing things that can grow upwards from there. And so when you have a flock of sheep, you can get meat, milk, and then you can get wool from it. And a lot can come from that. You can provide yourself food and sustenance. You can also sell that to people around you and make a living from it. But also the wool can incorporate into something I think was really died out here in Rhode Island and in New England, which was wool manufacturing. There's so many mills that are just relics that have been turned into high-end apartment complexes. And not like I'll get those back, but the idea is to, through a wool sweater, wool products, I can restore an aspect of manufacturing that was lost in economy to this region. And I mean, it sounds so grandiose when I say it like that, but I think by just getting some sheep and building up towards that, I can not only do something for my family, but I can bring something to families in my community and from my community outwards into the state and to the region and help ultimately uplift more families by creating more jobs because to create a wool sweater, you need multiple different processes. You have to shear it, then you have to clean it, you have to dye it. Well, you have to spin it, then you have to dye it, then you have to knit it, and then you have to, do the final manufacturing. All those are jobs. All those are things that it can create, which can help more families get jobs and work. And it's a weird way that ties you right to the land to an end product. I mean, it's an animal. It ties you to land. I can't think anything more powerful than that. We're not growing, cotton and plants. We're growing an animal, which provides so much to a family, and then it can provide to a region as well. And I just think there's something beautiful in that. And then you just tie in the idea of the Lamb of God into it all, and I just can't. The profundity of that kind of blows my mind. It's hard to even think about when you really look at it big picture too. So
One of the reasons I think wool is interesting is because it has a natural limitation in it for production. Because it's not, you can't just make more. Like you have to wait for the animal to be born, and then for it to get to a certain age, and then for it to be the certain time for it to be sheared, and like you have to work with the animal too. And so I'm a big fan of these processes that have natural limitations built into them, because often then they're tied to it goes all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation. It ties back into a rootedness in a place because certain animals work in certain places, which probably ends up creating certain patterns, certain staple lengths, certain colors because of historical lineage, just a whole bunch of adaptations which have led to that animal being right here, and then now us having the opportunity to steward these animals and incorporate them into this beautiful system. And maybe it creates jobs, maybe it creates opportunity. Certainly, it creates an opportunity, and I want to believe that it's not a temporal opportunity alone. It's an opportunity to grow in holiness, really.
right. And that,
So neat.
yeah, it's so neat. And then it feeds into, if you can kind of create that mindset and that kind of sort of family economy industry in the region, focus on an animal that works specifically in that region, it then feeds down generationally. So now you're setting the stage for your great grandchildren to reap those rewards, and then not only just the rewards of that production, but the rewards of kind of the mindset you're created, which is a holiness, right? And it's rooted in God, and so they can now reach eternity as well with you. And that's a huge mindset I have with all this: is how can I ensure that this right mindset outlasts me? I don't want my family to, because, I think the generation before me, my parents' generation, a lot was lost. I grew up as a cradle Catholic, and they got me through the sacraments, but that was it. They were just, I think that was just maybe more from the prodding of their parents to make them do it more than anything. And so because there wasn't a real true emphasis on it, it was lost to me in the beginning. And I have a lot of friends that still haven't come back to the faith because of that experience. And I think it's very sad. And And so I want to make sure I do something that doesn't let that happen again. I can't control the future, but I can definitely have an impact on something I do here just by everyday choices. And I think sheep have a great way to do that. And I was like, this is, if we're going to get the next thing of livestock, this is, I think, really what I want to focus on. I love them. I mean, I love the idea of getting more, to help with just a homestead and stuff. I'd love to get pigs. I'd love to get maybe some ducks, just some more animals here just to, experience it for the kids, get some more meat for our fridge. You mentioned to me that there's a big difference between farming and homesteading. And that is something I'm going to have to figure out because it's all new to me.
No, I think it's it's an important topic, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at another time too. I think people just need to be very honest about what they want and not what they're being, just what's best for the family. I think that's really the question. What's going to be best for the family, and do you have the right systems in place? Are you setting up a good plan? Are you going to be successful? Is this going to be more distracting than not distracting? I have a friend, and he'll talk about, very well known in the homestead Catholic space, and he's pretty clear about, this cannot destroy your family. Like, if this is going to actually hurt your spirit, your relationship with God, it's probably not a good idea to do this. In fact, it's not a good idea. You should stay where you are. You should not come out to the land. But if it's in the right framework and the right setup, and the family is going to respond well to it, it's probably going to be an amazing experience. But it's got to also be the right timing. I mean, it's got to be a lot of the right, and then really we have all these egos and ambitions and things and selfishness mixed in there, and so God will take that, and we just got to keep growing.
That's the tough part. I wrangle with that every day, and a real big emphasis of this, I think you hit on, is, does this work with our kids, with our family, to keep them aligned, to keep our family together, to keep my relationship with my wife intact and strong for the kids, and keep our relationship with God strong and intact, and not get distracted from what we're doing. And I think my emphasis is to build something they could truly be a part of. So one of the things when I was toiling away with just like stewing and thinking and writing for 2 years, and it's kind of what led to my emergence on X, and really sharing a lot of my stuff and starting my writing on Substack and my own podcast, just talking about things, because I was, well, what is it that I can do with these kids as a business? What can I bring them into a family business the most successfully, in terms of keeping us together and not putting a strain on the family and putting us through true hardship as a family, and keeping us aligned with God, right? So I wanted to make sure we had dinner every night. That was a big one for me, because at dinner we sit together and we pray. Before dinner we always pray, we bless our food, and then we pray. And it's a beautiful thing. We actually, and I don't even know how it started. I think my daughter just saw me do it, and so she did it too, and then the rest did it. And after we blessed our food, I then, did a prayer of just thanking things and, praying for other people. And then she did one too. I'm like, she first did this, she was like 4.5 rows, and she just started saying things she was thankful for. And I was like, that's really cool. And then my son, and then it's become like, sometimes it's like 10-minute ordeal, which is where we can be a little hungry, and we're like, okay. And what we totally embrace it and love it, because they love it and they're happy. And I just want them to be happy and connected with God. So, and if I can keep that going, then, and while we achieve everything we're trying to achieve for our family, then, I mean, I can't imagine a greater blessing.
That's so neat. So it sounds like you guys are in an awesome spot, and it's incredibly exciting to me to see you guys do this. I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk with you and meet with you here. Where, just maybe we'll leave with this, like what the next, we're heading into the growing season. I'm not exactly as familiar with what the growing, like, when does growing season start in Rhode Island? Like, so when's the last frost?
So the last frost is like May 1st.
Okay.
So it's a little while, but we have a greenhouse, not that big, but I can get stuff out there beginning of April, sometimes the end of March. And so I can start getting some things outside, and I have a system down in our basement. I have a bunch of shelving with grow lights, heating pads to start my seedlings. So I think here in New England, that's the name of the game. You got to get started, because our growing season is short. Things, you really have from May to September. and some plants are even more limited. And so it's, what can I get going as soon as possible? So we're about to order. We got to sit down this weekend actually and sketch out our garden. What are we going to grow? Like you said, well, I love the idea of going in our pantry and like, what do we eat the most? And one of the things we eat a lot of is outside of meat is potatoes. And we like barely grew any potatoes last year.
That's
just
my
so
point.
crazy.
I tell people that all the time. And like, you would feel so much more committed to it and like
Right?
excited about it because you actually know how to use it. And I just, get me on a thing. I was even thinking the other day, like you could have like a salsa garden. Like this garden is to make this salsa, or like a tomato sauce garden, like a row. And like in this row is the ingredients for tomato sauce. It's
love
like
that.
tomato, basil, onion.
Yep.
Like it's all here. I don't know.
No, it's true. And it's just funny when you realize like, what are we even doing in this garden? We haven't produced anything that we're actually going to eat. It's just so crazy.
You're like, here's this really cool herb and spice that's kind of sort of, I don't even know if I can eat it. Like
We grew this like spiceless habanero, pretty looking thing, and it grew a ton of them. And I don't think we used them like an eighth of it. But it was cool, man. It was cool,
Yep.
especially when people came over. We're like, oh, check this out. We'll cut some up, and they're like, oh, all right.
I think the funniest one is that what happened, people will get really fixated on all the cool heirloom tomatoes, which I think are
Yeah.
also super cool. But what ends up happening is you grew like 50 beefsteak tomato variants, and you don't actually put tomato slices on your sandwich. Like it's just like not even like something you like are in the habit of doing, but that's all you just grew.
We had half a row of that this past year. And not only was it a pain in the butt to manage, I did a terrible job because for some reason there was something wrong with them. I spent an exorbitant amount of time with them. And then at the end of the day, I barely even used them, which is just the craziest thing. And that's, the garden really teaches you a lot. And I think it's such a great way to tether yourself to the land, to be completely honest.
I
If
agree.
when you have a small little property, I mean, you don't need to get, fixated on animals. Yeah, you can get some hens in a backyard in a lot of suburbs, as long as the ordinance allows it, but you can almost always do a garden. And once you start doing a garden, you're in the land. You're now out there being susceptible to God's works, and He's going to make you struggle, and that's good for your soul. And I think that's what's so good about the land. It just makes you work for stuff, and
It's a great life.
I absolutely love
It
it.
really is.
And I rarely wear shoes in the summer because I love feeling it. So I recommend that to people, but just make sure you don't have anything sharp outside, because I've actually sliced the bottom of my foot open, which
Yeah.
was not pleasant because I stepped on a terracotta pot. So
Oh, that'll do it. Humbling as well.
very humbling. I was like, I don't know, maybe I should wear shoes finally, but yeah.
Good deal. Well, Greg, man, this has been awesome. It's great meeting you here. Where again, if people are looking to connect with you, where can they find you at?
So you can find me on X, Dissident Dad, or you can search probably Greg Cello now. I'll immediately pop up, but the handle is Dissident Dad. I have a podcast called The Dissident Dad Show, which is, I do them most mornings. They're not that long. They can be anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes. And I just talk about topics that are important to me, and I'll just riff on them. It's not overly produced. It's just me talking, and it's really meant for me just to talk to other dads who are interested in listening to another dad. That's kind of over all these heavily produced podcasts out there, and they're just kind of tired of me talked at rather than just kind of talk to.
Sure.
And then I have my Substack, Kinword, which is really the encapsulation of my entire belief system, and all my writings come through that. So, and I have it in my the about of it that I post on these days, but I got to change that because I just kind of post when I have something really good to share. And so it's a little more infrequent now, but it's still often, just I can't say what days it ends up being on.
Good.
Yeah.
Greg, it's great meeting you here. I hope you have a great day, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for being here.
Thanks, Matthew. It was a pleasure to be on here. You as well.
Thank you for joining us on the Cottagers Podcast. For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes or visit us at cottagepastures.com. We look forward to you joining us on the next episode.